Hello, you all. Thank you for being here in another episode of the B2B Insiders. My name is David Costa Lima, and I'm here with Gabriel Barbosa, and we are the founders and the hosts of the B2B Insiders. Gabriel?
Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to dive into the art of messaging. And messaging is, as you know, the backbone of strategic communication in B2B marketing. And we are so thrilled to have with us today Jess Cook, which is a master in crafting stories that resonate with the audience. Jess is not only the head of content and communications at Island, but also she co-hosts the insightful That's Marketing Baby, a podcast that I started listening a couple of months ago, and I'm thrilled about that popping up whenever a new episode pops up. Jess, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and with our audience in Brazil. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm Jess Cook. Like Gabriel said, I'm head of content and communications at a company called Island. We are the enterprise browser, new category, and really, really exciting growth happening there. So I'm really excited to have just joined actually earlier this month. I'm still in my first 30 days. But the first maybe 15 or so years of my career were spent as a copywriter and creative director for B2C brands. So McDonald's, Kellogg's cereals, Rice Krispies, and Pop-Tarts, and all of that. I made the transition to B2B marketing about 4 years ago now. So kind of taking that very kind of rooted in emotion storytelling set of skills and bringing it over to B2B. So I always, I kind of love that, how that background has helped me turn B2B marketing into more of storytelling and, not kind of the traditional playbook that most B2B marketing uses.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Jess, for being here with us. And well, based on what you said, I would like to do by our first question. So first of all, if you could explain a bit the difference between the B2C and the B2B message, and then after that, what is the core of a B2B message for in your opinion? Like, what's the most important thing on a B2B message?
Yeah. So I think it's funny, the lines between B2C and B2B are really starting to blur now, because I think people are realizing B2C, or business, to consumer advertising, has really nailed this art of kind of emotion, respecting the intellect of their audience, speaking directly to an audience as if, you are part of them, using those inside jokes, using the language they use. And I'm starting to see that so much more now in B2B. And I think really the what we're finding now is the crux of those things is the same, right? There's an emotion that a human has when they go to buy an Apple Watch, right? There's an emotion that someone has when they have to go buy software that's going to help them be better at their job. The emotions are different, but they're still, very emotional responses. And I think that's where B2C really nails it, is they play on that. B2B has historically really played on the features and the benefits of the product, when we could and should be focusing on the emotion of the person buying it. So to me, that's really the crux, or the really most important piece of good B2B messaging is understanding the mindset of the person who's going to be buying it, and using that to your advantage in your messaging.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wrote a LinkedIn post about that in the beginning of the year, in which I was, saying sometimes B2B can even be more emotional than B2C. And one example of this is that old IBM campaign. Nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. In some way, they are claiming, the trust that people have on the IBM brand, but at the same time, they are bringing the emotion of fear. Okay, so if you hire the wrong thing, you might even get fired, right?
Yeah.
Which is one of the primal fears that any worker and any employee of a company might have, right? So, and not only that, there's this bias in which you people say, I don't remember the name of the bias. I'm super bad with names, but it's like when you make a decision based on your emotion, and then you try to find data to back your decision.
Yes.
Right? So those two things for me are so interesting when you think about the emotion that is encapsulated in how B2B decision making happens, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's why it makes sense to me that so much top of funnel content should be built around that emotion. And you get closer to the bottom of the funnel, right? As someone gets closer and closer to that purchase decision, they're looking for those rational reasons why they should make that decision or why the decision is correct, right? So that's why you really want to hook people with that emotion. And then as you bring them in closer and closer to purchase, give them that data, that rational information to kind of round out the decision.
That's great. And then we're moving now to our next question. It's pretty much about that as well. It's like, how can you bring like storytelling elements, which is really well used on B2C, to actually back up a really strong narrative on B2B? So do you have any like framework, or how do you like to use that approach?
Yeah. So I do actually, and I can share this with you. You can share this with your cohort, anyone. I mean, we can link to it. It's out there on the internet for anyone to make a copy of themselves. But I do have, it's like 16 questions I like to use to warm up my brain before I start copywriting. And they're things like this, right? They're like, what's an analogy for this product? What's another analogy for this product? What is something really annoying that someone can stop doing once they have this product? How would someone describe this product to their grandma, right? And it's just like different ways to think about how to describe or talk about whatever it is that you're selling, because I think that's where we start to really dig into those, I always like to call them inside jokes, right? Kind of those insider language, or the way that someone that it actually is one of your buyers would talk about your product. And so I think that's really important to get at. Another kind of cornerstone of this is actually talking to your prospects or your customers. So, whether that's listening to sales calls, a lot of folks now have like a Gong or an Avoma that will record sales calls, or just sitting right in on a sales call, or whenever you're doing kind of a case study interview with a customer, really listening to how they phrase things, what the pain is that they talk about. I think all of that research is just so important in using the correct language in your messaging. So I think all of that is really, really important. Another thing is looking internally. A lot of times you will have people in your company who, if they weren't at your company, would be a buyer of your product. So for instance, a buyer or a user. So for instance, when I was at Lasso, my previous company, Lasso is a platform for the live event production industry. So anyone putting on, building the stage for a concert, there's a whole team of people, there's a whole company doing the lighting and the sound and the stage and the effects. Or putting on a corporate conference, there's a whole team of people that are planning that and, doing the audio and making sure the presentation looks right on the screen and setting up all of the tables, all of that. They have warehouses full of gear, right? And so Lasso was announcing that they were going to release, or they were announcing that they were going to have a inventory product so you could keep track of all of that gear inside of your warehouse. And so I was sitting down with the folks in Lasso who worked at Lasso, who had previously worked in a warehouse, because I wanted to know, like, what does it sound like? What does it smell like? Is it hot in there? Is it temperature controlled? Is it noisy? What time are you there? Are you there early? Are you there late? Are you there all day on your feet? Like, just give me the experience, right? What is the software like that you're typically using? Why is it so annoying? Why does there need to be a better solution? So really just sitting down and talking to those folks and and understanding their experience. There are some things you can never, I as a content marketer will never know what it's like to work in a hot, noisy, chaotic event production warehouse, right? There's no way I could know that. So you have to find those people with lived experience. And I just want to give you a really interesting example of like how that turned into a beautiful storytelling moment. So in that meeting that I was having with these folks that had warehouse experience, they mentioned to me that everything in the warehouse has a barcode on it. And that's how they scan things in. You know, they know this light is going to the Rihanna concert tour for 6 months, and it'll be back, you know, in October, and we'll scan it back in. And that gave me this idea of like, well, if we're coming out with our own inventory product, could it be interesting if, you know, the visual of a barcode with the Lasso logo on it, kind of visually announcing we now have this inventory product. And so the announcement video, the actual launch video, was shot in a production warehouse, an event production warehouse, where someone was kind of walking up to one of those big black event cases, you know, that all the guys kind of roll the stuff around in, and they slapped a barcode on it that had the Lasso logo, and it immediately telegraphed to everyone, Lasso has an inventory product, it's coming. And that was just something that I overheard in this meeting. And had I not spoken to those folks inside the company who had that lived experience, I never would have known that. I never would have had kind of this aha moment of like, oh, that's a really beautiful visual storytelling element that we can use to our advantage. So really, I think it's finding and leaning on the people who have those jobs to be done, who have those pain points, or have had in your company those pain points, and really understanding, like, continue asking why until you get to the bottom of like why they do what they do, what it was like, what was the most frustrating, what was the most exciting thing. Because I think once you figure all that out, you can really start to pick out, oh, you know, we could do a whole piece of content around this problem that they have. We can do a really cool video series around this really kind of exciting moment of working in this space. And you won't know that until you talk to those folks.
It's not about creating a story. It's about to listen to the story that people are already living there on the daily basis. So me and Gabriel in our course right now, the first module is about like to interviewing everyone inside of the company and also your outside clients, because and lots of times, pretty much most of times, like people see the value in different ways. So everyone thinks that it's one thing, but actually it's another. Or maybe the client perceives the value in another way, and then you can collect all of those to create a unique story that actually contemplates everyone. Like, so it's really interesting for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so Jess, I've been reading so much of your content and listening to your podcast lately that it might even have been you that said that, or I don't know if it was someone else, but I read something that is interesting, which is it's almost like you should not create a story. It's actually not, you should not, by what you're saying, you should not just create a story. You should just be the channel through where the story is told, right? It's almost like I recognize there's a story here, as you know, a journalist would do with an actual story. And I'm just telling that story, and I'm packing that story in a way that is understandable for people and for people to feel that experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I this is not a line of mine. Somebody else said this, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but it's very similar with copy, right? The best copy is not written; it's found. It's overheard. It's a saying or a phrase or an inside joke or you know, just a lived experience that someone has that you just happen upon as a writer. And because you're a writer, you know how to use just the right words to convey that feeling, that thing, that moment. And I think it's the same thing with stories. You know, I think the reason that video was so powerful was because every single person who's ever worked in a live event production warehouse knows what that means. We had the sound effects, we had the carts, we had the shelves filled with stuff, right? Like, it was very universal, but only to that group of people. It only really made sense to them. And I think that's really powerful too.
Well, awesome. And also that based on that, you did like global campaigns, right? Based on insights. So what's your process for uncovering those insights in order to make the stories like how that works?
I had a lot of experience in this at Fastly, actually. So Fastly was a very complex kind of internet infrastructure provider, and also dealt a lot with security, like web security. And we created this global research report that, we interviewed people all over the world. We were able to kind of slice and dice the data by different regions. So, the Nordics and the UK, we could slice it by, kind of like the Pacific region, things like that. And we had to keep that in mind as we were building this campaign, that, someone in Germany was going to be reading very similar data to someone in the US. And like, how do you make sure that that feels universal to two very distinct groups of people? And I think one of the secrets to that is, one, I think you have to make things very plain and simple, like very just simply state the thing that you're trying to get across, because it's going to be translated. It can't be any sort of colloquialism or, really like slang phrase in the US is not going to translate well anywhere else in the world. So I think you have to keep that in mind. And I think to do that, I like to look at some of the brands who do that very well. Apple, I mean, they're just like a case study of like doing things well in any case. But I think something they do especially well is just really simple messaging about their products, about the feeling you get from their products. And it translates, right? Because it's so simple and straightforward, it means something to everyone all over the world. So I think there are ways to really kind of like figure that out, which is, what is kind of the simplest form of this. Even that sometimes isn't going to translate directly. I think that's why when you're doing things that are global in nature, you have to have a really, really good localization partner. You have to partner with them very, very closely. But I think a lot of that just comes down to not trying to a lot of that comes down to being clear over clever. And I think that's really, really important just in general, but specifically when you're trying to translate a campaign globally.
Yeah, that also reminds me of another phrase, and it's so difficult to know who attribute some phrases to, but it's that one. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Yes, I love that one.
It's great, right? Because you can, in the messaging stage, and that's one thing that we bring to this module of the course that we just told you. Write as much as you can about the pain, about what are your features, what's your capabilities, what are the benefits that you're delivering. But when you translate that to the tactical phase, then you have to, because you have so much to unpack here that you are already able to understand what you are going to choose in what phase and what maybe channel or type of content or format of content at the tactical phase, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think is the best way for you to choose what you are going to use in different formats? For example, what do I choose on a video? What do I choose on maybe a homepage? What's maybe the balance of the story that is going to bring a feeling of the experience the person has using the product, and also maybe numbers to back up the benefit they are going to have, right? So how do you find that balance in different formats? I know maybe it's a lot it's a long question with maybe a long answer.
Yeah, that's all right. It is. That's a big question. And I think with so many things in marketing, it depends. I think one, it really depends on the size of your team. I think a video first approach is actually starting to become the preferred method of a lot of small teams, because one, we now have so many tools at our disposal that makes video easy. It used to be if you wanted to do a video series, you had to bring in a production team to help you. You had to have a really skilled editor to cut that video down. You needed a really long timeline to, get the whole video interview and then decide which clips you wanted and cut it down into those clips and add some branding to all those clips. Now, I can do that on my own. I can record it in Zoom. I can move it into Descript and cut it. I can add branding in there, and I can post it on social tomorrow if I want, right? It cuts it. The tools at our disposal have cut that down very, very quickly. And I think people are taking that video first approach because it's much easier to go from a video interview and repurpose that or kind of reformat that into a long form piece of text than it is to go the other way. If you're starting with text, you kind of have to figure out like, which part of this do I want to become an interview? Is this whole thing worth a series, right? So I think if you start with the video, this is something that I have found, you can capture all that information, even if it's just an informal interview like this, right? Where, it's not polished. I'm just in my office. People expect that now. I think, post-COVID area, we're very tolerant of kind of this lo-fi production. In fact, it feels more authentic. And so if I can get all of those insights on video, now I probably have 3 or 4 blog posts worth of information here. I can send this video off to a freelancer who might be able to kind of break that down into a handful of text-based posts. I can myself jump into Descript and I can cut up all of these assets, right? Now that's if you're a small team. If you're, let's say, a larger team, or you have a ton of opportunity with certain keywords, right? You might want to start text first. You might want to really think about like, okay, bottom of funnel blog post, product-led blog posts are really going to get us a ton of traffic. We're a product-led sales motion where someone just has to hit book, buy now. They don't need to talk to sales. They don't need a demo. Like, let's get someone through this as quickly as possible so that they can buy the product, right? And that might start for that team with very strategic SEO strategy. So it really depends on like, what is your go-to-market kind of motion? And are you an investment? Are you an enterprise investment? Or are you a, $29 a month with a freemium kind of trial, right? So I think those are the things you have to weigh. You have to really understand the business goals before you can decide, are we going video first? Are we going text first? Like, what's going to help us? What I do really believe in, no matter what, is just the power of repurposing and reformatting. So if you're going video first and this one clip from this one, 30-second moment of this fuller video just outperforms everything else, you've got something there. There's something that's resonating. So turn that into as many things as you can. Turn that into, a text-based thing. Turn that into a carousel. Like, repurpose and reformat the heck out of that thing. And same goes with text. If you have a blog post that is like your number one kind of piece of content before someone converts, like, turn that into 7 more things. Turn that into, put that anywhere. Turn that into a paid campaign. I think when you find something that works for you, no matter the format, like, double down on it, reformat it, repurpose it, distribute it as much as possible. So that was a very long question to a very long answer to a very big question, but a very important question.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think what you said, it's definitely right. Like, you need to understand your go-to-market. You need to understand exactly how much costs your product and how does impact like the complexity of the sales. So
Yes.
all those kind of things. impact. So, and it's really aligned with what me and Gabriel always say. Like, we need to understand your ICP really well, and based on that, you have to test the message. So, I'd like to ask if you have any, because this is after when you have your messaging, and then you can actually distribute in different ways, but now, so it's not about creating new messages all the time or creating new blog posts. It's about to, first of all, validate your message, and then there's a frequency, right? Like you need. Well, again, about sentence, right? I read somewhere my sentence states like, when you start to get quite annoyed with your own content, maybe your audience start to pay attention to you. Yep. So it's about to validate that and repeat. So do you have any kind of framework to test the message, to see, sometimes you're like, I don't know if I go this way or that way. How can you make that test to measure and they actually go?
Yeah, I think social is a great testing ground. It's a nice place, especially if you have a decent sized following already, to just kind of see like, did this perform better than average? And if so, like, let's try it again in a different format, or let's repost it again in 3 months or 6 weeks and see if it gets kind of the same traction. So definitely social media is a great ground. Ad creative is also a really great place for testing. And I think a lot of it has to do specifically with messaging. Keeping all things equal, which of these headlines resonated better with our ICP? Okay, this one. Okay, let's try a couple different variations of that one, right? Okay, this one actually did better that time, right? So, you might even get to a point where you find like this line, like nothing can beat it. Like, let's put this everywhere, right? And so ad creative is a really, really great way to test that, because you can do it pretty quickly. You can usually give yourself a time frame of about 2 weeks and you'll know if it's working or not. You can do it with relatively low budget, given the audience. So I think that's a really, really nice place to test. I also think it's a smart idea. Like, if you have a big idea, if you're like, this kind of needs some budget behind it to like do what I think I want it to do, put it in front of your audience, put it in front of a customer that you have a great relationship with. Hey, does this like resonate with you? Does it feel, we're about to kind of go all in on this, and I want to make sure it feels, right. Get some feedback on it before you put the money behind it, because, the worst thing you can do is like find that it didn't work when you've spent, all your budget on it, and now you're wondering what to do next.
So you're speaking about testing, and I've done some testing, and one thing that I found is for B2B high ticket, you don't have so much volume, right? Mm-hmm. So if you test on your website, sometimes so you get to a place in which you are going to have statistical relevance. It's not that easy, right? Do you find that sometimes it's you have to pursue the numbers to actually validate? It could be anecdotal from the sales team. Like, yes. What are the things that you use to bring those insights in?
I think that's such a great point, Gabriel. So yeah, there's a point where like you're too small to have the numbers to really know if something's going to work. And so yes, your best bet is then like, all right, hey, sales team, this is what I heard from you from the last 3 months. I'm building a campaign around it. Does this kind of answer the objection or the emotion that people are feeling when they come to you? Yes, no, great, right? And so I think that's why, one, working with sales as you're building things like that, it is super, super important. But yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to go on gut, especially those early days, right? And by gut, I mean like after doing all of the talking to all of the right people and getting an understanding of your ICP and what they're worried about, their jobs to be done, all of those things, like that's where you should start from, right? It can't just be pure like, I think this idea is cool, and so I'm going to go after it. It has to be based on some sort of conversation, some sort of insight, hey, I've built things around, like, we had a guest on a podcast at Lasso who happened to be our ICP, and he said a couple things that made me think, like, oh, there's something there, like, take that nugget, pass that around to sales. Hey, I heard this latest podcast guest say this. Is this something you hear from people when they, come to you in a meeting? Yeah, it is, actually. Okay, great. There's something there. And you can go off and kind of create a social post around that and kind of start small, or a blog post around that. I think the thing to remember with content is you can always add to it. Like, once it's out there, it doesn't have to be final, and you should be updating it. You can have some sort of interesting piece that you think, because you've heard from sales, could be a great blog post. So you go and put it out there, and 6 months down the road, something, hey, AI comes along and now it kind of changes things, and we should jump in and we should talk about that in this piece because it affects, what we were talking about there. Things can shift in the market. Things can shift, with people's roles, and, and how do you address that? You can always jump right back in and make updates. And I think that's important to remember too. I think sometimes we forget, like, we can go back in and change this or update this or add more context if need be, but, like, let's get something out there and just see how people react to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then what you said, it's I think that, like, April Dunford, she said that positioning something alive, it's always changing, it's always, like, moving, right? It just like messaging as well, because messaging comes from the positioning. So you need to be aware, and then also changing, because there's lots of things that's happening in the world, happen in the context, in the market, that change how the consumers think, how they behave, and you actually need to adjust your messaging to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something quite nice that you say about the AI, because right now the AI can be a really good ally for the sales teams as well. You need to test message to see how this message is going to resonate, and then you have the AI to give you those insights to organize the ideas. So my question for you, Jess, is, like, are you using AI for your messaging? How is this new AI world, like, into the message? Is still a bit old school? No, there's a lot of things that you're doing already with all these tools that are available.
Yeah, I have played around with AI. I have not found a tool that I love yet. I think it's just still so early. I've not been able to find the quality that I want. Now, something that I do love to use it for is just general research, right? Like, hey, give me 10 things that, right now our target audience is people in the IT world at Island, right? So give me 10 things an IT person worries about on a day-to-day basis. Like, it's great for that kind of thing, right? Just kind of like brushing up on, what do I need to know about this audience? Another thing I do like to use it for is just to make sure I don't have any gaps in my writing, that I haven't thought, that I haven't missed something that I should have thought about, right? So one prompt that I actually really like, and I like to use Jasper for this, is this is important because, and then I click the little Jasper arrow and I let it kind of generate a sentence and kind of see what it comes up with. So just adding maybe a bit more depth or context to a paragraph here and there, where I'm like, this feels a little light. I wonder if, Chat GPT or Jasper might be able to help me kind of fill this in a bit, but always still validating that information that is being generated with, internal experts, because it could just be complete gibberish. It could just be, so obvious that it kind of brings the rest of the piece down. So I am looking forward to, I think there's a couple tools that are soon to come out. One of them I'm really excited about is a friend of mine, Tim, just created something called Pen Friend. So if you are interested, he's doing kind of a beta test of that. He's spent hundreds and hundreds of hours just understanding prompting for content writing, and really figuring out how best to, like, prompt AI to build quality pieces. So that's kind of an interesting one I'm excited about. I'm just excited to see, as it comes out and as it gets better, like, how is it going to make our lives easier? But I'm sure, in some ways it will it will make us all have to kind of sharpen our skills in ways we can't even fathom right now.
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard not to look at all the hype, and as you said, it's just early days. It's almost like GPT is iPhone as it started, but no apps yet. And
Yeah.
now with the new thing that they just launched, now people are not speaking about that anymore because of all the saga throughout this whole
Oh my
weekend.
gosh.
But
Can't wait for the
yeah,
Netflix special.
yeah, I bet. They're already writing it. They're getting David Fincher to direct it.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. That sounds great.
yeah. So so those new tools, I hope they are I agree. I think it's still very early. I think there's a lot you can do, but we have not scratched the surface yet, and it's just something that is going to make our life, I hope, is going to make our lives even easier. So that question was from Natalie, from the audience, and another question from Natalie, which was great, is is there something that you see? You already mentioned video, right? But are there channels or formats that you think are worth looking at and investing at in 2024 and going forward?
Great question, Natalie, and thank you for all of your awesome questions. I think something I'm seeing a lot more of is B2B brands using influencers. And I think next year it's just going to explode. I think it's going to be more than just like, hey, post about us on social. I think it's going to be like very tight relationships with the right types of influencers who, may lead webinars or come talk at, customer events, or may even appear in ad creative on behalf of that company. I think the shape that these relationships are going to take are going to be much bigger than just, hey, talk about my product for 3 posts across, the next 6 months. That'd be great. So I think that there's something to be said there about like finding the people who are vocal on social platforms that your ICP lives on. So, for some that might be LinkedIn, for others that might be TikTok. I think you kind of have to figure out like what is that channel or channels. But finding the people who have a really loyal, engaged following, kind of no matter the size. I think B2B influencers are still really in the midst of growing their audiences. There are, a handful who have just a huge following. But what you might even find more authentic is someone who has kind of a mid-range following, right? That their followers are really engaged. They love their content. They comment every time. They, attend events just because that person's going to be there. So I think that's going to be a big trend next year. We're just going to see that like blow up.
Great. So now I do have a question for you, Jess. So like B2B in general, the B2B tech, like the last, 5-10 years, but especially the last 5 years, being something like that's really gets stronger and stronger. And I think LinkedIn has been a great platform in order to share value, to share. As a marketer, do you think that people are more and more interested in strategy and less dependent on just the tactics, on the copywriting hacks? Because I think this is something that a lot of people still think that there's a silver bullet, right? If I change this letter here, like this sentence here, I'm going to have max success, especially people who does outbound. So, well, as someone who's expert in the messaging, how do you see this whole B2B thing? Do you think like people are becoming more strategical because studying more? How do you see that?
Yeah. Okay. I love this question. I will tell you right now. So I started at Island on November 1st, and I have spent 3 weeks deep in planning for next year. It's been strategy every single day, which is great. I think that's where it should be. because we have very big goals. Like we have very big things we want to accomplish in the next 2 years. And so I have to be thinking, my team have to be thinking 18 months out, not, hey, in the next quarter, we need to do this. So I think that's a big part of it, is like looking out further, planning much further ahead. It is going to become much more important. I think we've seen, how the world can change in a week, as it did in 2020. And, unexpected things can happen, and you have to be looking that far out to not fall behind, right? We don't want to, in a year, start thinking about how are we going to bring awareness to this brand, because we already want to have brand awareness at that point, because there are certain things we want to do the following year that we need to have that brand awareness built up in order to do, right? So I think you have to start thinking like, what's the end goal for, 2 years out? How do I get to where I need to be in a year to make that a reality the year after that, right? I think planning further out, being strategic for a longer period of time is going to be really, really important. And I think building brand is actually going to get more and more important. I think the B2B companies that focus on their brand as much as they focus on, lead gen tactics, or more than they focus on lead gen tactics, are going to be the ones that win. And I think part of the reason that I'm really bullish on that is because, the companies that really stand out in my mind have focused on that the last year or so and have seen that pay off. I think the companies that, think another ebook is going to really just put them over the edge are being incredibly short-sighted, right? That's never going to be the thing that's going to turn you into the next Slack or, the next Airbnb. Like, it is going to be your brand and how you treat it, that is going to elevate your company to that level.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a lot that you've been saying throughout the whole episode, which I think maybe, it would be great to have your commentary about that as a closing, because I think it actually closes the loop. You've right at the beginning, you said the lines between B2B and B2C are becoming a lot more blurred, right? That's one thing. You mentioned influencers, which is something that's been out there in B2C for a while now. And now you're mentioning brand creation and branding, which, it's been there in B2C for a while as well. And now we are starting to speak a lot more about that on B2B, right? So, and there are things that nobody's doing in B2B that is already being done in B2C for a while. So if you think about channels, for example, right? Like, think about Instagram and TikTok. I see a lot of people saying, oh, when people are at those channels, they don't have the mental availability to think about their jobs. But it's not about their jobs. It's about what happens in their lives, right? Yeah. Like you said, it's about the experience they have in their daily lives. So is there something else that you think, channel-wise, format-wise, other things that you think that people are still not doing that could be done in B2B? So I thought of those two channels, but there's something that I spoke about this. I posted about that yesterday, actually. Live commerce, for example, right? Those influencers selling, millions of dollars in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. That's something that, of course, it's not going to happen on B2B the same way, because it's not like a $2 purchase. But it's something that has never been done. But it's never been done, but until someone does it, right?
Right. Exactly. I don't know if it's so much about a channel, as it is about just being a little bolder. Ann Handley, actually, about a month ago, Ann Handley is kind of like the founder of Marketing Profs, incredible marketer, brilliant woman. And she gave a talk at like the Marketing Profs kind of big annual conference about a month or so ago, where the whole topic was about being weird. Like, please, let's be weirder in B2B. And I think it might be that. I think it's that we're so afraid because we're supposed to be a B2B brand, we need to be professional. But there's something about being different, being unique, being a little quirky, really having a voice, and like making sure that like when I see an ad for that company, I know it's from that company, right? That I don't know if a lot of B2B brands are doing that. Now, that's not saying you all have to go out and be Liquid Death like that. There is a very specific type of weird that will work for your brand. And there's a very specific type of weird that will work for your audience. Like, marketers love weird. Like, give all of the weirdness and the dumb memes and like give us all of that. There's a very specific type of weird for a developer audience. Like, that looks very different, right? Now, I think you have to understand, like, what is the good kind of weird that your audience wants? And like, don't be afraid to put some of that out there. We talked about testing. Test it. Like, see what happens when you get a little weird. And test it. Don't be afraid if it doesn't work the first time. Like, that might not be the right kind of weird, right? But I don't know. I'm excited to see in the next couple of years, like, some B2B brands just get bolder, be less afraid, maybe use some of their budget, like set it aside for like, this is the weird budget. Like, this lets us get a little weird and test some stuff, and be okay with that. And I think we're going to see the brands that try that and test that and find the sweet spot of weird. Like, they're going to do well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think there are some people doing that already. Like, it's quite funny because I actually posted like a couple of weeks ago, and then there was a huge engagement because I said, like, well, B2B is not boring, not supposed to be boring, but also not supposed to be cool. Because I think sometimes I see that, like, yeah, Iago said the winter, Pip, yeah, he's really good on that. Like, because sometimes I think you need to, B2B can be funny, B2B can be fun, B2B can be a bit more weird, but we also need like to be really attached to our objective. It's not just like engagement for engagement. So that's a challenge. As I said, you need to balance those two things. So it doesn't need to be boring, but also not be that cool because, well, it's not Liquid Death at the end of the day, right? So yeah, no, that makes total sense. So Jess, I would like to first thank you so much. It was such an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, me and Gabriel and all of the B2B insiders, they're here right now with us, and then they're gonna listen afterwards as well. So when people want to find you, where is the best channel, where you are, tell us.
I'm on LinkedIn. I post nearly every weekday, and I'm very good about like jumping into connection requests. If you drop me a little note, hey, I heard you on B2B Insiders, like I love to connect with folks there. And you mentioned earlier, I co-host a podcast called That's Marketing Baby. It's with my good friend, Susan Winograd. I'm kind of like the content brain and she's like the paid media brain. And we, have a good kind of back and forth there about very kind of holistic marketing. And we have a lot of fun on that podcast. It's just like a weird, again, going back to the weird, we're not afraid to embrace our weird conversations about marketing. And yeah, those are kind of the two places you can find me.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for your kindness of, setting aside some time to speak with our friends here. And everybody in the audience, thank you, the insiders, for the questions that you posed for Jess. And a big thank you for everyone tuning in as well. And remember to follow B2B Insiders on LinkedIn. Now, also, we are on Instagram and TikTok. Besides following B2B Insiders, follow me, Gabriel Barbosa, and David Costa Lima on LinkedIn. We are both also on LinkedIn, so follow us there too. And thanks, everybody. See you next time.